Hello and welcome to Mission Wilderness. I'm Shane and my mission is to bring you deeper into the wilderness with trip videos, educational content, and gear reviews. This mission brings us to the Kawishiwi Triangle, located in the central southern section of the 1.1 million acre Boundary Waters Canoe Area wilderness. It's been a dramatic spring here in the Boundary Waters, primarily because we had a very long, very cold winter, and that winter extended into April. The ice got thicker, the snow load on top of the ice increased, insulating that ice and slowing down the melt, creating conditions for a historic ice out spring. So most of the lakes in the Boundary Waters are still iced in, but me and two friends got really lucky. And so far we have been very, very pleased. We entered into South Kawishiwi, which starts off with a long portage this morning at about 10 a.m. There was some blowdown that we cleared out, and we eventually got onto the water at about 11 a.m. It is at this time just a little bit after noon. We are on the South Kawishiwi River. We've been paddling that for a little bit of time here. We're probably about a quarter of the way up before we get to our first portage. After that first portage, we will be on the Kawishiwi Triangle. There are three missions that I have for this trip. The first mission is to survey the ice out conditions as well as the spring water levels. The second mission is to travel to a large set of glacial erratics, which are located in the northwest corner of the Kawishiwi Triangle. And the final mission is to travel to Murphy's Falls, which is located at the base of the Kawishiwi Triangle on the northernmost section. So over the course of the next 3 nights and 4 days, we'll be traveling to these various locations. We will be reporting on the ice out conditions and on the water levels. You can consider the first report to be that the South Kawishiwi River is wide open. There isn't a bit of ice here. There's no ice on the shore. There's no ice floating around. Ice is out on the South Kawishiwi River for all intents and purposes. At the same time, the water levels are super, super high, which is great news because water levels have been low for the last couple of years, and it's about time that we have enough water in the Boundary Waters to be able to float our boats, if you will. So far, it's really good news on the South Kawishiwi River. Just before I came, just before this trip, I checked social media, and from what I could see, it looks as though the ice on the bigger lakes is really starting to break up. It's starting to get that dark color and turn into that candle ice, which means that it's unsafe to walk on, but also means that paddling season is just around the corner. We also have great conditions for the ice melting. The wind is up. The wind is certainly up today. The wind was way up the last couple of days, as evidenced by the blowdown we experienced. In addition, we've had some very warm temperatures. Everybody's kind of on the edge of their seat, hoping that the ice is going to break up and that the lakes are going to open before the fishing opener, which is happening on May 14th, which is just coming up this weekend here. And I think that people are going to be very pleasantly surprised. It's going to go right up. That ice is going to go right up to the day, but I believe that by fishing opener, things will be available for people to go out and to fish. This is not a fishing trip. It's not fishing season yet. This is the first paddling trip of 2022. So it's going to be a good trip. I hope you stick around. I hope that you enjoy it as much as I intend to be enjoying it as well. We've been progressing pretty well. We've got a good southerly wind. We are now at the top of the channel. We're right at the point of the channel where there are sort of two little bays that are across from one another, and there's a campsite on the southern edge of the bay that's on the left side or on the west side of the river. From here, if you look right off the bow, what we can see is we can see that the channel goes and then terminates off to the northeast. But if you continue to go in that direction, there is another channel which breaks off into the northwest, and that is actually the main river channel. We are now paddling into the channel, which leads off from the section of the South Kawishiwi River that eventually gets us to the Kawishiwi Triangle. And the current is actually pretty noticeable, which is a little unusual. This is a fairly lazy river under most circumstances, but right now we actually do have some real current. In fact, I've got to pay a little bit of attention to how I'm paddling the boat because there's enough current in the river to be pushing the boat around. We are coming upon the first portage now, and this looks very different than it did last fall when I was here. This is an interesting situation. This portage used to portage around a rapids to the right-hand side of the river. Now what it is it looks to be an island. There was a point coming out into the river, and now what's happened is that point has become inundated, and there's a rapid on both sides of the portage, and then there's an island, and the portage, at least where it was, now goes across the island. And there is a giant eddy behind the island that I'm in right now. You can see the backwash from the river. Looks like there's some blowdown here, probably from the blowdown that also impeded our progress on the trail earlier today. But I think that, you know, in the continuing report of the water levels, this suggests that the water levels are unusually or extraordinarily high right now, to the extent that they've turned this point of land, or what was a point of land, into an island. And then you can clearly see from the vegetation on the shore, whatever these shrubs are here, it's hard to tell. They haven't budded out or anything right now. But whatever these shrubs are, they're inundated at the root. This dogwood up here is also inundated at the root too. So it does suggest that water levels are super high. They're very high. Well, I am back here close to the portage, and it does not look, it looks worth taking. It looks pretty simple. Rapids. So I think that I'll go ahead and I'll take the portage. We're back on the water, we're past the portage. That really puts us officially on the Kawishiwi Triangle. At this point, we're on the western side of the Kawishiwi Triangle, going down to its apex. We plan on camping right at about the apex of the Kawishiwi Triangle, but we do have a navigational challenge. The north side of the river is relatively consistent. As long as we follow the north shore and keep it to our left, then we shouldn't have too difficult of a time you know, just kind of getting directly to our campsite. The problem is that we can get suckered into turning too soon if we try to follow the south shore. The south shore is probably great for day paddles, probably really good if you want to go find some wildlife early in the morning or later in the afternoon, but navigationally it's better to follow the north shore. After the river narrows substantially enough to feel the current, and you come past and you go into that last opening area, what you want to do is make sure that the little islands that you see are off to your left, and that you continue to go until the opposing shore is almost directly across from you to the east. As you get closer to the channel, it will reveal itself. It's very hidden. You have to get all the way to the east side of this little wide spot in the river before you can clearly see the channel. But then once you're there and you can see it. If you don't see an open channel that's going beyond where you can see, you're really not looking into the channel, and you need to continue to paddle east. sounds good.
They were doing geese.
Yeah. It's been a while since I've been on camera. Honestly, I've been out here for a couple of days. The first night was super cold. The second day, it sort of threatened rain and spit on us all day long. And then it rained really hard all night. And then the third day, it rained all day. We hid out under the tarp. And then it rained all night. It rained really, really, really super hard with lots of lightning and thunder. We literally didn't get off the campsite, but it wasn't a problem. We spent most of our time just talking, bouncing ideas off of one another, checking in, having a good time. And I was trying out a solo stove, the campfire, which is, it's classified as a camp stove as opposed to a fire pit. It has all the same features as a solo stove light or a solo stove bonfire, in that it's got really great airflow. It pulls air from the bottom and it contains the fire, and you can get a concentrated burn. And it's a more efficient way to burn fuel. I wanted to see if the campfire would be good for a campfire in shoulder season when it gets a little bit cold, and that first night it was down to about 40 degrees. And I wanted to see if that campfire would be good enough for 3 people to huddle around and gain enough warmth to sort of cut the cold with, and it did that. So I used it both as a fire pit and a cook stove. My only complaint is my complaint that I always have with when I cook with fire, and that is that it just gets so sooty. You know, everything, all the pans get soot on them, and they blacken up really bad, and then that soot has a tendency to transfer to a lot of stuff. So it's just kind of hard work, getting the fire started and then cleaning up the pots and pans afterwards. All of that is a lot more work. Even if I looked at the campsite that is on the north side of this open area of the river, and it was just getting blasted by wind. So I'm not interested in having a campsite where I get a lot of wind. The bugs aren't a problem yet, and I would rather have some shelter from the wind at this stage because the wind is going to be a little bit cold and it's going to be strong at this time of year. So I went and I looked at the campsite that's in the channel back here that kind of heads out of the Kawishiwi River Triangle, but that's occupied by a local. And so what I'm doing is I'm backtracking and I'm headed over to the east side of this open area. There's a small campsite that's hugging the east part of this channel. And it's not facing south. It's got a little bit of a northward face, but it doesn't have a lot of catch in front of it. And then from there, what it's got a line of, well, it looks like some jack pines and some cedar trees that provide a block so that the wind might whistle through those trees, but it's not going to blast you over there. And the takeout looks really good also. So I think this is going to be a fine place to spend the night. It is open too, so I'm just going to do one night here, and I'm probably not going to spend a whole ton of time at this campsite because I'm going to go there, I'm going to set up my tarp, I'm going to set up my tent, let things start drying out from last night, and then I'm going to head up through Clear Lake, go to the Erratics, which are on the northwest corner of the triangle, and then head up to the base of the triangle and look at Murphy's Falls. It should be really interesting to see Murphy's Falls at this high water level. It'll be difficult just to get close to it. So I've got a nice little camp, it's all set up, it's ready to go. After that, I did some bathing. It was necessary after 3 or 4 days of rain and not having a chance to get wet. It is a very breezy day. We've had a couple of storm systems blow by us, and they're sucking wind into them, something fierce. The wind is coming in pretty strong gusts. Wind was just blowing so hard that I washed some clothes, hung them up, and let them dry, and then I took a little bit of a nap. Now it is 3:28. It's 3:28 on May 13th. This is Mission Wilderness, and the mission now is to visit the Erratics on the Kawishiwi Triangle, located on the northwest corner of Kawishiwi Triangle. Those erratics are often pictured by people who visit this area. They are also mentioned in an essay by Sigurd Olsen about this very land, the Kawishiwi River, which he calls No Place Between. And then of course we're headed to Murphy's Falls, and then after that, back to the campsite. So hopefully back to the campsite by 8 p.m., which means that I've got about 4.5 hours. 8 p.m. is sunset. Sun is out, there are some high clouds. Nothing looks too threatening, it's just breezy. In the forecast, there's a 20% chance of rain and breezy, but it has become less breezy over time. This is a tailwind now. It's going to help push me to the Erratics, but on the way back, I may be fighting it. So I am on that open area of the Kawishiwi River on the west side of the triangle. I am just past the northernmost campsite in that area, and I need to go ahead and take a look at the map to make sure that I'm not going to go down a false channel or something. I know that somewhere there is a portage trail that leads to Clear Lake, and then we'll paddle across Clear Lake. There'll be another portage, and then we'll basically be at the Erratics, and another portage, and then we'll be at Murphy's Falls. So we are going into that channel behind the northernmost campsite. We're getting a sense of what this landscape is like. Looks like a lot of jack pine, some white pine, and then there must be some wet ground too. We've got some dark spruce about, but looks like a pretty mature forest, maybe about 100 years old. So what a difference just a year makes. I was here last fall and you couldn't even access this portage trail without dragging your canoe through a bunch of really slimy, really soupy mud that just wanted to suck you down into it. And now there is water all the way up to the portage trail, and then it looks as though a little beyond, so that the portage trail might be a touch flooded. So what I'm doing here is, I know the portage trail follows the edge of this over to my right, and if you're portaging from Clear Lake on the left side of this pond. So I do think that, yep, there is the portage trail. So I should be able to easily just get out and portage right over here. Okay. That is actually a pretty easy portage trail. The first part of it is submerged, but it's easy enough to paddle. Where it's not submerged, it's all pretty high. A little rocky, a little up down, but 70 rod, easy peasy. We are on Clear Lake now. We are on the southwest corner, coming off the portage. And what I see in front of me is what I would expect to see, and that is I'm seeing what looks like some islands with channels between the islands off to the left on the kind of northwest corner shore of Clear Lake. That I'll follow that shore until I get to the portage. Right on the other side of that portage, we will find the glacial erratics. I just passed a beautiful piece of igneous granite. And I think that we'll be looking at some granite here when we look at the erratics. An erratic is a boulder that is then pushed to a new location and dropped there by a glacier. And as you might know, this area 11,000 years ago was covered in glaciers. That rock that I just passed by, that piece of granite, it was formed more than 1 billion years ago, deep under the surface of the earth. We wouldn't see that. That's bedrock. But the only reason that you're able to see so much of it here in the Boundary Waters is because those glaciers retreated only 11,000 years ago. So this landscape is bedrock, and it was uncovered. That is, all of the topsoil and the soft sedimentary rock, it was all torn off, ripped off, pushed away, and pushed south of us into the Great Plains. But here, what it's left behind is an ancient landscape. And you really get a sense of how ancient it is when you see rocks like that igneous outcropping back there, granite. That is just beautiful. And now we're going to see something very similar to that when we get onto the North Kawishiwi River and we take a peek at the gigantic erratics in the middle of the stream. I am now on the North Kawishiwi River. I just completed the 100 and some odd rod portage between 100 and some odd rod? Yes. I just completed the 100 and some odd rod portage from Clear Lake to the North Kawishiwi River. It's 4:30. I got on the water at 3:30. So in an hour, I've been able to make it to the North Kawishiwi River, where I'm about ready to turn the corner and see the erratics. It will also give me a better sense of how high the water is right now, which is the first mission of this trip. We are now sitting on the leeward side of one of the erratics here on the North Kawishiwi River. They're very noteworthy in this part of the river because they're a somewhat unique geological form. And they are noteworthy because Sigurd Olsen mentioned them in an essay in The Singing Wilderness, which was his first book after he decided to leave his teaching profession and become a full-time wilderness interpreter and wilderness advocate. I think that I passed by these glaciers last fall, and when I passed by them at that time, I felt like I was way below them. And now I feel like I could stand up in my canoe, and I couldn't quite look over the erratic, but I could almost do so. The water is up by about 5 feet, but they are mighty. They are mighty boulders here in the middle of the river. It's hard to know exactly what kind of rock it is. I mean, because it's got all this lichen on it and it's weathered pretty heavily. And I can't classify rocks super well, but what I've studied so far tells me that A rock's hue and the patterns of the minerals and how they crystallize in the rock can tell you quite a lot. This is clearly an igneous rock of some kind, which means that it was formed directly from molten rock, either underneath the surface or above the surface of the planet. And if it has a pink hue to it, and it does appear to have a pink hue, at least its cognate over here has a bit of a pink hue, then it's probably some form of granite, which means that it is it's rock that's formed from relatively lighter minerals, generally a lot of quartz, feldspar, some other minerals that give it that red color. So it looks to me like what we're looking at here are a couple of pieces of granite. They may not have been picked up and moved very far because a lot of the rock in this area is very similar to that granite. But its location is noteworthy, and I tend to trust Sigurd Olsen. Sigurd Olsen, of course, was a conservationist, and he had a master's degree in ecology, but he also had a master's degree, or at least he had made a lot of progress on a master's in geology. So he knows geology pretty well, and generally is a pretty good interpreter. So I'm going to take his word for it. Those are glacial erratics, and they are a marvelous thing. They connect us to the past. Not only do they connect us to the glacial past of the Boundary Waters Canoe Area wilderness, but they also connect us to a person like Sigurd Olsen, who on a spring day, before the ice had fully broken up, snowshoed up this river and walked past those erratics. He was inspired enough to mention them in an essay. Sigurd Olsen spent his entire life in the Boundary Waters, as many people will spend their entire lives dreaming about and looking forward to the time that they can have in canoe country. And they'll pass that love on, in many cases, to their immediate family, sometimes to friends. It's a cultural treasure because of its history and how it's connected so many people across time. We have completed mission number 2. We have visited the Erratics. And now we are on to mission number 3, and that is to visit Murphy's Falls. Again, mentioned by Sigurd Olsen in the Singing Wilderness. It's the only reason why I even know what the name is, Murphy's Falls. Although Sigurd Olsen refers to the portage trail that leads to Murphy's Falls as Murphy's Portage, and other people refer to Murphy's Falls as Murphy's Falls, in none of my research could I discover who this Murphy person is or was, why it's called Murphy's Falls. In the early 1900s, there was still quite a bit of virgin forest here, and much of it was logged, as well as the area off to the east. And so it may be that it was a foreman, maybe it was a great cookie that's being honored, maybe somebody owned this land at one time before the land was incorporated into the wilderness area. It's really tough to know exactly what it is. So I don't know why it's called Murphy's Falls, but it's a beautiful waterfall. It wasn't that hard to get to last fall. I was able to step off the portage trail and I was able to walk up Murphy's Creek, that is the creek on which the waterfall is located. But water levels were low last year. My guess is that creek is going to be up, 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 up. It's going to be up super high, and as a consequence, it's going to be very challenging to be able to get down at the level of the waterfall and see it from the bottom. I'll probably have to find a way to get above it and then look down on it and see where it's at. But it should be pretty interesting to see. Now, it looks like I'm coming upon a new obstacle here. There's a swift here, probably a small Class 1 rapid. It doesn't appear to have a portage trail, or if it does, that portage trail is probably inundated by the river. And I'm wondering if I can't paddle up it. There might be a portage trail off here to the left I'm seeing. Wonder if I can just paddle up it though. I might be able to. I think I can just come up, I can kind of sneak here and then ferry across into the slack water. I'll give it a shot. It might work, it might not work. I might have to go to the portage trail, we'll see. Oh yeah. I'll be portaging this. Well, maybe I can get by it on this side here and then line it. The middle of it played havoc with my canoe, but over here along the side I may be able to squeeze through. Let's see. Oh, my cameras are gonna run into some popple here. Well, no dice. Looks like I'm gonna have to run it and then go over to the other side. There we go, the eddy just turned me around quite nicely. Here's what we got. I believe that this is the little portage, and in this case, going upriver, it's going to be necessary. On the way back, though, I should have no trouble running that bad boy. Okay, here we are. Under lower water conditions, that would not be a portage. That was not a portage the last time I was here. I hardly remember it, as a matter of fact. I don't think it required anything more than to just go through a quick swift. I don't believe I even had to get out of the canoe. The next portage is about 25 rod, and then that takes us into the lake that will be the lake from which we'll access the Murphy portage as we shift our direction from northwest to east on the base of the Kawishiwi Triangle. Well, very sadly, this trip will end without accomplishing mission number 3. I'm walking a tightrope anyway. I needed to arrive at Murphy's Falls by 6 p.m. in order to ensure that I would be able to get back to the campsite by 8 p.m., which would put me in about sunset and civil twilight and enough time to cook my supper and get ready for bed and make sure that the camp is secure before I go to bed. But I came up to this last portage before the final portage to Murphy's Falls, and coming upriver, the portage trail runs to the right-hand side of the river, and the river has expanded out and is now overwhelmed the portage trail, and it's done so to such a degree that I don't know if the portage trail will survive or if it will be a portage trail in the same sense. It's deep, it's rutted out, it's dangerous because there's really hard current running through trees, and so falling down could mean getting swept into a strainer of some kind or back out into that main current. And it's about 25 rod, so it's a long portage. It's a long rapid, and it's a very narrow rapid, and if you got stuck in it, it wouldn't be great. So I might have been able to thread the needle and get through there. It's a possibility, but it would have taken some time to be really intentional and really careful about every step and move. I probably would want to have a rope on my canoe so that I had a little more flexibility as to where the canoe was vis-a-vis me. And I just think that it looked like a mess. And I'm sure you can tell by looking at the footage, it's a disaster. I mean, it's walking in water up to my knees or my thighs. Certainly not getting in the boat. The current is really strong running over what was the portage trail. So there's just no way that that's going to work coming from this direction to see Murphy's Falls, which makes me a little sad because I would like to see the falls when the water is high like this. But perhaps I'll be able to come back again later this summer and do a day trip out of farm or something like that. It might be a fun picnic trip. So mission number 3 will not be accomplished. But, you know, I get to camp another night in this beautiful place. The spring peepers are singing their chorus. It's gonna be a little tough, a little slog paddling back to the campsite since the wind is coming pretty strong out of the west. I should make it back in time, certainly before 8 o'clock. Mission number 3 not accomplished, but mission being in the Boundary Waters is accomplished. To the South Kawishiwi River. I am now on the same body of water as my campsite, and it looks like I'll be able to have plenty of time to make my supper and to tighten up my camp and get a good night's sleep. Good morning, Mission Wilderness friends. It is the 5th day of a 4-night, 5-day journey into the Kawishiwi Triangle. I am just leaving my campsite now. It is approximately 10 a.m. and what kind of got me motivated to get going this morning was I saw some sort of gathering clouds on the southwestern horizon. I thought maybe I was going to be in for some stormy weather. Now that I'm on the water, I'm looking at the sky again, and it looks as though it's broken up quite a bit, but there will be rain marching around today. I just hope that it doesn't turn into anything too serious. I've got that large section of the South Kawishiwi River to go to after the rapids that we portaged around on the way in. It's been a good trip. We have 3 missions to sort of investigate spring paddling conditions. Water levels are high, ice is out, at least down here on the Kawishiwi Triangle. We were seeking to view the Erratics mentioned in Sigurd Olsson's essay in The Singing Wilderness. According to Sigurd Olsson, Kawishiwi means, in Ojibwe, the original language, it means no place between, a holy place. I certainly get spiritual sense, and if attendance is to be any indication, a lot of other people do too. This is one of the busier parts of the Boundary Waters. And we did see those erratics that were mentioned in Sigurd Olsson's essay. They look like they're substantially underwater, which informs the first mission. The third mission was to go to Murphy Falls. I think we had just enough time yesterday to get there and no dice. But you know, sometimes that happens. I just read a book by Lawrence Gonzalez on survival. He talks about the psychology of survival, and one of the specific things he mentions is that people who go into the wilderness who survive are people who are flexible. You know, they have a plan, but they're not afraid to change the plan as conditions warrant. And people who have a plan who are unwilling to change that plan, they oftentimes get themselves into trouble. And the story he used to illustrate that idea was the story of some mountain climbers in Yosemite National Park who, you know, they had a plan to climb what was normally considered a relatively easy peak, but it was still a pretty substantial peak. And they ignored the weather, they ignored a few other things, and they just rigidly stuck to a plan when changing that plan might have been enough to save at least one of their lives and prevent some serious injuries for some of the other members of the party. So it's a good lesson. We have missions on Mission Wilderness. We attempt to accomplish those missions, but as conditions warrant. I thank you for watching. I look forward to providing you with another video that brings you deeper into the wilderness.